And again, welcome everyone, everybody who maybe just joined here in the last minute or so. I'm Joy Beatty at Seilevel. Here's a quick look at the agenda for this morning, or this afternoon, I guess depends where you are in the world. First of all, we'll just do a quick intro into what do I even mean by Agile in the large enterprise. I'll talk about some different scaled Agile approaches, a bit of time, and maybe the second half of our webinar, talking about what are those challenges that we run into when we try to scale Agile to the large enterprise, regardless of what framework we're using. And hopefully I'll also give you some takeaways, not just talk about the challenges. And we'll leave at the end a little bit of time to review some next steps, key takeaways that you can go back to your day job maybe and apply if you're either beginning a transformation or well into it and maybe running into some of those challenges. If you have questions, by all means, I do encourage you to start adding those in the Q&A box from the get-go. I will try and look at them periodically, but Jessica will help me manage that at the end. We'll leave time for questions. I also, at different times, going to ask you to engage with me in the chat box. Please feel free to drop in comments into the chat box. And to that point, right now, it'd be interesting to hear, if you don't mind sharing in the chat box, if anybody wants to put in there, like, are you actually actively using Agile now? Are you in a large organization? Or are you thinking about transitioning to Agile? I'm just kind of always curious where the audience stands in that perspective. So feel free to drop those in. I'll glance over here at it in a moment. All right. So what does it mean to be Agile in a large enterprise? So I want to break this down sort of at the definition level. When we call it scaling Agile methodologies. What do we mean by that? We're talking about moving from that team level where I've implemented Agile up to the enterprise level. So I have lots of teams perhaps using Agile at that point. And there's a lot of things about Agile that are really good, really strong. But when we scale it, we're going to see issues beyond what happens at that team level. Those are things like dependencies, maybe synchronizing across teams, keeping delivery teams on track with overall enterprise strategies. System architecture becomes more complicated. There's a lot of bad systems out there already in our organizations, and now they're going to be a much bigger mess when we apply Agile approaches if we're not careful about that. And then at the highest of levels, portfolio management across an entire organization is actually quite a bit harder. One organization, we've worked with this company for years. About 5 or 6 years ago, they tried to move to Agile. Excuse me, and the CIO mandated that every project will use Agile. I'll tell you that project teams took it upon themselves to implement Agile, and they failed for a variety of reasons. They each made up their own approach. They didn't have clearly defined roles. It was generally just a mess. They tried again about a year or two later, and again, it was under a mandate. The CIO said, we absolutely all will use Agile on our projects. This time, they were going to take the biggest and riskiest project in the organization and apply Agile there for sure. And the CIO had his eye on that one project, which, this project had probably another 50 projects that interfaced to it. So the executives thought, if we can get this one project to be Agile, all those other ones are going to have to follow suit because this one's Agile, right? I got to be frank with you guys. I would never in a million years have suggested this approach. It feels really risky. Again, it's the biggest, riskiest project in the entire organization. But they did it while our team stumbled over what to do. Absolutely had some issues there. But most of the issues that came out were around interfacing or interlocking to other teams, to other systems. I'm going to talk about this a bit more later in the webinar. But one of the things that we did was to create some level of what we called an Agile requirements document that's simply for the purposes of other teams knowing what's going on and being able to plan for it to help with some of those integrations. It's interesting to just kind of close the story up. Fast forward to today, I will tell you most of that organization is in fact using Agile approaches. Some are less glamorous than others. That's okay. In large organizations, I anticipate that will always be the case. But the point is they're doing it. And so while I would never in a million years have suggested that approach, I didn't suggest that approach, they're making it work. Okay, that kind of gets to the beginning of it. I want to break down Agile in a larger enterprise a little bit further. Let's click slide. There we go. So what does it mean to be Agile? Many of you are going to be familiar with the Agile Manifesto, right? So the manifesto says things like, We value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, so things on the left over things on the right. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Responding to change over following a plan. Okay? This is where we value on the left over the right. That is, while there is value in items on the right, we're still going to value the things on the left. It's not saying we ignore what's on the right, okay? So these are key core values out of the Agile Manifesto, and people often forget about the items on the right. A lot when organizations are new to Agile, they really focus only what's on the left and think that they can drop a lot of what's right. But everybody recognize that the manifesto does not say we do instead of the right. It's simply we have room for both. We just value the left more than the right. This becomes super important when we get into the Agile enterprise, okay? In space, right? So real quickly, what does it mean to be large enterprise? So forget Agile for a moment. This is kind of what I'm loosely defining as large enterprise. You don't have to fit all these criteria for your organization to be considered large. This is just an example of what I think it means. So first of all, I'm talking big. Just a rough suggestion, but you might look at something like even revenue. Do you have $1 billion in revenue? That's probably large. It doesn't mean that $500 million isn't, or the $2 billion actually is. It could be anywhere in here. Generally speaking, we're looking at organizations where you have more than 500 employees in an IT organization. You may have 200 and have some of these issues. That's okay. Which typically means we're spread out, and often globally so, right? So challenges. The teams are in different places, often very different time zones. Large IT also means that we have lots of people, systems, and data that we're working with. Lots of things in play with one another here. And typically, there's some kind of a corporate strategy that is way above what we're doing on a project level that is actually driving the individual projects, okay? So that's just kind of an example of what I mean by large enterprise. Now, take a moment and have you all, again, use the chat screen if you don't mind, and give me a sense of what you guys think. What are the most important skills that we would use to apply Agile in large enterprise? We've talked a little bit about Agile and a little bit about large enterprise. What do you all think? And you can pick from this list, or you could throw in other things that I haven't even thought of. So again, try and hit the chat window if you don't mind. I will tell you that I got a random mix of answers from we're using Agile on one project, we're transitioning to Agile, project, transitioning again, we're using Scrum. So I had a lot of good answers. I'm in a large enterprise, but we're not using Agile in my group, but we are everywhere else. So kind of a mix in the audience today. So that's great. This will make this interesting. All right, in terms of skills, here's what's coming in. I've got planning collaboration. I have no earthly idea. Thanks for the honesty, Sonia. Hopefully by the end, Sonia, let me know if you have a better idea. I'm hoping we get there today. Planning collaboration, using the same tools for collaboration. That's great. Thank you, Craig. Lots of planning, lots of collaboration. Here we have a vote for leadership. I like that. That's Todd. Facilitation, effective communication, planning sprints, building and trust. These are good. Answers. It's interesting to me. Pause here for a minute and just reflect on what I'm seeing come in so far across the board. A lot of kind of the first three bullets that I've listed. I haven't seen creativity come in. That's okay. Business analysis and project management have not come up. And I'm wondering to some degree that might be because people traditionally don't associate those role names with Agile. And I would argue that those are both very relevant skills to bring to Agile. You may have different job titles, but the skills that you use in those are so relevant to the work that we do when we're working on Agile projects. So hopefully we'll see a little bit of that today. A lot of people answered and included. These are just skills that you use in those fields.